Hello, everyone. My name is Bianca Griffioen. I'm an Agile coach and trainer, and I have been with the Kanban University since 2012. Ever since I started in the Agile field, which is late 99, I have encountered a lot of different organizations. And I want to tell you about some experiences I had with 3 of them, and especially around the subject of value-driven decision making. The companies I've worked with are usually very large companies and are very complex organizations. Complex meaning a lot of domains, a lot of stakeholders, hierarchy, a lot of hierarchy, distance between IT and customer side of the companies. And it is pretty hard to add value when you're in the operational part of the company. And the value that you are supposed to make a contribution to are set by the strategic part of the company. So how do you connect those two? How do you get in line, those two in line with each other? And before I start with explaining some of the thoughts I had and some of the ideas we have implemented, some of the experiences we had, I want to introduce 3 companies where bits and pieces are in this story. And the first one is the Ministry of Justice and Security, and especially the part Dienst Justitiële Inrichtingen, which is in English custodial institutions, agencies. So we have like 50 locations all over the Netherlands, and the DJI, which is short for Custodial Institutions Agency, carry out penalties and custodial measurements imposed by the judges. 50 locations, about 37,000 new detainees every year. So large, complex organization. The other organization I want to talk about is the Dutch National Archives, Nationaal Archief in Dutch. And this is a somewhat smaller organization responsible for archiving as well digital as physical archives for persons and everything which is of national interest. They have 125 kilometers of physical archives. And you can imagine that in these digital times, they need to digitalize more, but they also have more things to archive in a digital way. So this is a complex matter. And the last company I would like to introduce is the Schiphol Group. I can imagine that almost everyone knows Schiphol Airport. And Schiphol Group is responsible for managing Schiphol Airport, among others. Schiphol Airport alone is the residence of 800 companies with 68,000 employees alone. Schiphol Airport is the 3rd passenger airport in Europe and the 4th freight airport in Europe. And in 2019, there were 72 million passengers in Schiphol Airport. 3 very different organizations, very different nature, but still a lot in common. And while we were introducing all new concepts and all new ways of working, we relied heavily on the Kanban way of working, especially on the change management principles and the 6 practices. So what do these companies have in common? Overburdening, that is one thing. Overburdening was really a big problem. At the Dutch National Archives, I still can remember the head of the department saying to me, people were in line in front of my door, which is 3 doors down from the IT department. So you can imagine how much people coming to their office every day. Management by cookie. If you do this, then I'll give you a cookie. Management by hierarchy. I'm the highest up in the tree, so you'll do this for me. And other ways of management you can think of. Another thing which is very common when you have overburdening is that priorities are not clear. So you're not aware of what you should work on next. You are not aware of what brings the most value to your own company. And the last I have already explained, complex on very different levels. complexity on very different levels in the organization. So one of the things I would like to address is how can we add value on an operational level when the things we should add value to are set on strategical level? How do we connect? How do we align? I'm going to introduce a small new way of working with which we experimented. And what we did is we set values at strategical level, and we cascaded them downstream. And with that cascading, we also cascaded other boundaries, not only the values, but for example, budgeting and scoping. But what values should we work on? Let me give you an example. In 2019, one of the strategic pillars of Schiphol was excellent visit value. So let's say, for example, that is the value we should work on. That Schiphol said, okay, says that is the value, that the gap where we want to be and where we are right now is the largest. Then all the initiatives we should work on downstream should contribute to that value. How did Kanban help? Well, what we especially used here is visualization and make policies explicit. And we started drawing a lot. The first picture we drew was very different from the final picture we drew on the new way of working. And the biggest problem we had was that it still was an unfamiliar way of working. It's experimental, and we introduced a way of working. We introduced a new organization. We called that product streams, with multidisciplinary teams on all levels: strategic level, tactical level, and operational level, with their own responsibilities, accountabilities. But this was still very unfamiliar. So let's take a look at how it looked like. So here you can see the strategic group of people, the tactical group, the operational and realization. The last two groups are both operational level. We were not able at this point to bypass the hierarchy of the organizations I've worked with. And that had to do with the experimental stage that we were still in. So what we did is we introduced value management and value delivery. Value management are the values that we should need to work on. They were pushed from strategic to tactical level. And then the initiatives that would contribute to that value were pulled from tactical to operational level. Here you can see what I mean. And we call those values apex features, but you can call them whatever you want. I hear some companies using user stories, using initiatives, using themes, which is all good as long as it resonates within your own organization. But the moral of the story is that strategic level is responsible for value management. On tactical level, there's the tipping point from value management to value delivery. They translate the pushed values to the initiatives. And on operational level, those initiatives were carried out. So now that we've got that problem solved, we came across another challenge, which was, okay, now we know which values we should work on because they were pushed by the strategical level, but we have all these initiatives, and all these initiatives contribute to this value. So what should we work on next? And what we did is we made every level for itself in this virtual organization of multidisciplinary team responsible and accountable for their own decisions, which was quite a challenge because a lot of people were not convinced, especially middle management, that people on operational levels could make those decisions. I actually had one project manager say to me, "You mean that this team can decide which solution is best and which solution should be carried out? Those people are not capable of doing that. They cannot oversee all the impact." Yes, they can. They are the experts. They have all the knowledge of what to do on an operational level. So you should let them decide where the solution is. This had quite some challenges in several organizations I've worked with. So every level decided for their own what to work on next, as long as it was within the pushed boundaries, within the pushed values, and within the boundaries set upstream. And here we relied very much of the encouraged acts of leadership at all levels, and we limited WIP. And that gave us the possibility to get away from the overburdening. So let's see in the picture I drew before what that looks like. So here we have the complete picture. You can still see strategic level, responsible for value management, from tactical level, responsible for value delivery, and teams working on that what is valued the most first. On the left side of the picture, you can see the values. The green one is the most important one, and that is the one where the most initiatives are, and that is the one that is carried out first by the operational part of the organization. So we introduced value management and value delivery. We introduced feedback loop. We introduced pushing values downstream, pulling from that point initiatives to contribute to that value. Having feedback loops, you can see the blue arrows on the bottom of the picture, about these initiatives and about these values. And although this was still in experimental stage, this already helped a lot. It made things clear, people got insight, oversight, and people knew why they were doing. And so they were more enthusiastic doing the work they had to do because they knew what it was for. They knew that they really made a contribution, and they knew where and how and why. So we had one big problem left to solve. And that was because this was still in an experimental phase, and because this was still a virtual organization, we did not have any dedicated operational teams making the product, the features that we wanted to deliver. Which meant that we had to compete with other types of work coming into those operational teams. In other words, we had to manage flow. So I also draw a picture about that. This is the first one I want to introduce. On the top of my drawing, you can see users. I'm sorry, that's still in Dutch, I see. Then you can see key users, project management. These are all just different stakeholders with different interests on the same team at the bottom of the picture. This team has its own process, and the goal is happy customers, added value. So there are actually 3 types of work coming to these teams, like smaller incidents, service requests, like could you please do me a password reset for me, or this is supposed to work but it doesn't anymore, please solve. Small changes, operational changes, lifecycle management, patches. This is very IT driven. You can see these are IT teams. And larger changes or project changes. So in the operational teams, we had to compete with different types of work. And the biggest challenge was competing with the project changes, because those were the larger part of work that were not like the basic work that these teams were supposed to do. These are IT teams also responsible for development and our operations. And we made some policies. For example, we agreed that there should be a minimum WIP, that we agreed that they should work on at least 2 of the features that they pulled from the backlog of the new way of working, the new virtual organization. So now we know what the situation was for the operational team. We knew what we had to do with. We knew which agreements we had to make, which policies we could agree on. And finally, we could let work flow from strategic level, value management, to operational level, value delivery. And finally, above all, the most important thing, add value to the organization as a whole. As I mentioned before, the Kanban change management principles and the Kanban practices were very important throughout these journeys. We relied heavily on them. And although not always named as such, as because the agile way of working already is starting to get some negative associations with some people. And although the different organizations had different starting points and very different problems, in the end, it all boils down to the same thing. We want to accomplish flow so we can add actual value. The biggest challenge we had was closing the loop. Closing the loop from strategic level, operational level, and back again. The river can start flowing, but how does the water get into the river in the first place? And perhaps in my next journey, that's where I should start.
All right, thank you, Bianca, for a very valuable talk on value. There you are. Good. Up. We're muted. So. Can you talk? Do you hear you?
Can you hear me?
Up. We hear you now. Yes, I think you are muted on the other end. Okay. Very good. Would be questions without answers otherwise. So let's get some question and answer. Great. Thanks. Yeah, excellent. So the first question up is how were you able to well, you talk about the challenges you had with project managers willing to empower the operational teams to be able to make their own decisions. So how do you how did you work to convince them, or how do you convince the middle managers that people in operational levels are able to make good decisions and oversee the impact? How are they able to handle that and be more effective in that than, say, that middle manager who thinks that's the value add that they make?
Yeah, well, when we started, by the time this project manager came into the picture, we were already rolling. So by that time, I could say, this is how it is. And I would like you to join us. But in the beginning, it was pretty difficult. So what we did, we always talked in terms of experimenting. Will you go on this journey with me? Will you do this experiment with me? And then involve them heavily in the decision making and let them have the insight of the difference between value management and value delivery and roles people have in the organizations. So what I find is that roles and responsibilities are quite often in large organizations not clear. So people in middle management tend to make decisions that should be on an operational level and the other way around. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And that's good. Good perspective. The next question up. And how do you implement different types of values at different levels? What are those? I think you mentioned it really was strategic level, tactical level, and operational level. So how do you implement it? And I guess the other question I've got that comes out from this is the discussion of value different? Is the languaging even different at these different levels? Or do you find them to be pretty much the same? Are the conversations similar?
No, I think you always should use the language which resonates with your audience. So on an operational level, you have different language than you have on a strategic level. And the more higher up in hierarchy you get, the more abstract a value is. So you have like big container-like values on top, and the more you cascade down, you wanted to get more, how do you call it? More, so you can really see. I'm lost with an English word. You're no longer having these abstract terms, but you're really having things you can work on, items that you can do, and these are big on higher levels, like a program size, and then you have like this project size, and then you'll have like this change sized values.
All right, great. Now, did you use the value conversations to influence things like capacity allocation, or was it more primarily prioritization, or what are all the different knobs you had to influence that these you're trying to drive through the conversations and the decisions that flow from that?
Yeah, we actually had two, and those were the two you were mentioning, Todd. These were values on one hand and capacity on the other hand. So we used values to decide what to work on and what not to work on. So that was the demand side. On the other side, on the delivery side, we checked on what capacity do we have. And as I said in my talk, we had like not... the operational teams that we had were not only working for the product streams and the value streams, but had also their own other activities they had to do, like from maintenance perspective or other major projects that were running at the same time. So there was the capacity was allocation was very, very important based on the values that we cascaded down onto that level.
Okay, excellent. How did you select metrics associated with value delivery?
Well, that was still a challenge we didn't figure out up until the end. We were like in this organization with one foot in like this agile way of working, and the other foot was still standing in the old industrial thinking. So the reporting size, the reporting part was still very much in the are you within your budget, are you within your scope, are you delivering stuff that you should be delivering. And along that, we also created value-based reports, but we didn't figure out yet the sweet spot for management to really adopt those ways of those reports. But what we did, because we cascaded the values that you would like to work on, we reported on what value we delivered and how much we delivered on it. And that was basically it at the time.
Okay, great. Now, if you look at what some from a business outcomes perspective, so you've made these conversations, the conversation about value, and made this cascading, and made some decisions. At the end, as you wrap it all up, what do you think were the biggest tangible business outcomes that you're able to come out with from making this conversation more tangible and bringing it forth?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Could you rephrase that some?
so in the end, how did the business benefit from this? So we've got teams. So were there anything specific you could call on that you felt like that the teams were more focused on, and they actually did get more direct value? Was there anything tangible that you could relate to?
Okay, I understand. Thank you. So one of the things is because these organizations are large and complex, we found that the product streams were delivering faster products because we worked in multidisciplinary teams. We made sure whenever we started a new epic that everyone we needed was on board. That made the decision making pretty quick. And we didn't have to go what you see in large organizations around to get all the right stamps in your passport to be able to go to the operation and say run. So that was one of the things. We were much faster. The quality was higher also because of the multidisciplinary teams. So when we delivered something, it was already, we knew it would be accepted because everyone was involved. And because everyone was involved, it was also the quality that we wanted to deliver. The other side of the medal is that we needed to really focus on not get into the nitty-gritty details on a pretty early stage in the process. So we had to try to be as agile as possible, like the bigger parts first and then fill in the details as you go.
All right, great. All right, and then we got a question here. What are some of the different types of leadership challenges you faced, and how did you deal with those challenges at the leadership levels?
I think the biggest challenge was and still is closing the loop. So we were able to get from strategic level what values they found important, but to get from the operational level back to middle management and technical level, that was also pretty much in place. But to get back from middle management to higher management, that was really a challenge, still is a challenge. We didn't close that loop yet. I think that in these cases, a lot of it's not in the DNA yet of higher management to think about value management in this way, and to know that and to realize that there is a two-way communication in value management and value delivery. So my biggest challenge there was in terms of leadership is how do you involve strategic level and how do you keep them involved and interested in the products, not in the products, but in the product streams and the value streams that you were coaching.
Okay, yeah, great. That is a challenge, isn't it? It's yeah. They think they've done their job at the beginning, and the feedback loop is the big challenge. It's always a feedback loop. That's no, excellent. Thank you very much. Excellent, very very valuable, and we really appreciate it. Thank you, Bianca.
You're welcome. Thank you too.